So we're back here. This time we're going to be talking about cabinet scrapers as requested by someone. Now, as you can see by the layout on the table here, that there's a lot of scrapers. There are a lot of scrapers around here. It's a big thing here. Now the scrapers are usually, they come in many different types. All of the types that you see here on the bench are so-called hand cabinet scrapers. Now they can be just plain with a plain straight edge. They can have shapes where you can use them all around for different shapes of work that you have on. Something like that, something like that. Now scraping is pretty hard work if you got to do a lot of it, because first of all, what happens when you scrape, you have to hold the scraper basically in this position. You have to put pressure on the back of it to bend it slightly, and then you push forward at a certain angle, taking shavings out of that piece of wood. What that does is essentially the scraper gets really hot. Your fingers start to burn after a little while, and the amount of pressure that you put on the sides, basically it digs into your hand. So it's quite a bit of hard work if you got to do a lot of it. A lot of them that I have for many years, basically they've been sort of customized with stuff to keep the heat away from your fingers and keep the sharp edges away from your hands as you tension and bend them. So it's a necessary tool, because what happens is if you're working with woods with difficult grain or highly figured wood, like for example this piece of walnut from an iPad case that I made, which is from the crotch, this is impossible to work with a hand plane, and the only thing you can do with it is you either can sand it forever or you can scrape it smooth, which this was. So they're perfect for woods like that, but they will work on any wood without tearing the grain. Essentially, a scraper is basically a piece of metal where you polished an edge, and then, unlike a chisel or a plain iron, you're going to take that edge and you're going to bend it over, creating a burr. Ordinarily, when you sharpen something, you want to get rid of the burr. Here you want to have a burr, and you want to have a burr as consistent as possible across the blade, and sharp and at a certain angle sticking over. So as you can see, if you run your hand on it, some of these are not very sharp. Here's one that I use often. So there's the burr right there. And that's what it cuts when you put it in that position and you push it across a piece of wood. Now, a scraper, you can sharpen all four edges on a scraper like this. And on this one, again, you do it all the way around, so you could use it anywhere. Now, they can either be with a square edge like that, which is the most difficult one to sharpen. Essentially, it looks like nothing, it looks just like a piece of metal cut. Or you can put a bevel on them, pretty much like a plane, and then bend the burr over to the other side and use it that way. This one, of course, could only be used on this side where the burr is, because you cannot put a burr to the other side on the bevel side. But something like this, you can put a burr on four sides. So this scraper would be able to use on four sides. It's dull. You turn it around and you turn it this way, and you could even do that edge, which it is, for smaller stuff. So that's the idea behind that. Now, these again are all hand scrapers, cabinet scrapers, and most of the times they are sharpened with a square edge like that. So we're going to put these guys away here. Now I'm going to demonstrate how to sharpen one. I'll use this one, which is a little bit of an antique, and actually it's never been sharpened. I never used this one. And again, I throw them around a little bit because I have a lot of them, but you don't want to really, you got to treat it like a chisel and not want to bang them around on each other so you don't ruin that burr. So you got to be careful. So they can be used by hand like that, like these, or you have planes which are scraper planes. This is a scraper plane, and you'll go right up to an edge like a rubber plane. The handle can even be turned so your hands clear the sides. And again, it's sharpened the same way. It's got a thick iron so it doesn't shatter, and it's sharpened the same way as all the others. It's got a fixed throat, so you cannot control the angle on this one. So when you bend that burr over, when you bend the edge over, it's got to be a pretty precise way that it's bent. There's no adjustment on it. This is another cabinet scraper. This one will have an adjustment where if you bend it over too much or not enough, you could change the angle here of the scraper to allow it to cut, and you would push it that way. Again, with that edge catching the wood and scraping a shaving off. Same thing with these guys. This is a simpler version that looks like a spoke shave. It's a cabinet scraper, and again, you do it the same way. And this one, you actually the same as you would do with your fingers, bend it. This thumb knob here bends the blade also, so it cuts basically just around the center to make it easier. This is another one, and again, this one has adjustment on the angle. These are usually just they have a bevel, so you can only use one edge. Sometimes you do the other side, so you could turn them around and use the other side without having to sharpen them. So essentially what you do to sharpen these things is you got to create a beautifully straight, sharp, polished edge, and then you bend over the edge on each side to a certain angle. Now the first thing you do to sharpen them is you have to joint the edge, make it straight and sharp. So you do that, you place it in a vise like so, and then you take a file, make a little guide for it, a little joining guide like that. Same thing you would do to sharpen a handsaw to straighten out the teeth before you actually sharpen them. So now you joint the edge of the scraper. Keeping that part against the scraper, so you make a nice square edge to the sides. You don't need to apply a lot of pressure. Basically let the file do its job. And it doesn't take a lot of time to do that. It's already good. It's straight, shiny throughout, and square to the sides. Now you gotta polish this a little bit more. So what you do is you actually take it to a whetstone. So we're back at the whetstone here. And again, this is a very narrow edge. I'm just doing one edge here now, but you could do again the other three. So you're going to sharpen that edge. And again, you're going to use the edge of the stone here because you don't want that little, very narrow edge running on your stone. And this one, you can't really make any motions circular motions, you pretty much got to go straight back and forth so you keep it perpendicular to the stone. Always lubricate it. And now you keeping it perpendicular. Now you work it on the stone without tilting it, just perfecting that edge. As you do this, you're going to create a burr on the sides as the metal wears away. So again, you put the stone flat like you do a chisel, the back of a chisel. And again, you're gonna just polish the sides like that. The other side. Well, this is the first time I sharpened this one. It's never been done before. And sometimes you're not always successful the first time, depending on the scratches they have from the factory. And again, don't be in a rush to be done with this step, because essentially it's the most important step of it. Clean the stone frequently so you're not writing on worn metal particles from before. Again, this should be done on a fine stone, because this is like the final honing on a chisel. Keep it perpendicular, don't rock it from side to side so you don't create a rounded edge. You want a nice square, straight edge. It's getting there. So we're gonna change to the other stone now. That polishes it a little bit to a little bit of a finer degree. And as you can tell by the sound, it barely makes a sound. It really just works almost like a strop. Either this part, make sure it's absolutely flat. Okay, we're gonna, for the sake of moving on, we're going to call it done. But again, you should never rush this part. And this scraper again should have been polished a little bit more on the sides there. Basically, you make it like almost like a mirror finish, although it's quite not as important as on the chisel. All right, so we call it finished here. Now we go back to the bench with it. So now, we hope we have a nice, beautiful edge. Straight, flat across this way, and with two sharp edges on the side. So now what we need to do is we need to bend that edge on each side, one this way and one this way, in order to create that burr. Now there's a couple ways of doing this. You got to burnish this with a burnisher, and that could be with a burnisher like this that I use all the time, which is extremely hard steel and perfectly smooth. And what you would do with this is, again, you put it on a vise. So you're gonna have to put a bit of pressure on it now. Put it on the vise. Don't leave too much sticking up because you don't want to bend it. I don't know if you can see that. There you go. And you would apply a little bit of oil to that burnisher. And of course it's empty. So here's a little kerosene on it. Works just as good. And now you're going to, at a slight angle towards each side, run it along the blade as to push that tiny edge over. I'm doing one side only, my left side. You can sort of feel it. Keep the same angle. You can run your finger on the side and see if you feel that burr, which I do. Okay, now I'm going to do this side. And the secret really is to, let's say you start level, and with each pass slightly cant the burnisher over to push that edge over. If you try to go at an angle from the beginning, all you do is you dulling that edge. So you want to actually sort of make the metal expand over to the sides and bend it over. And it's pretty good. All right, that's a way of doing it. Another way of doing this is, there's a tool for this. There's a tool for this. Okay, so you see my nail catches that burr. And if you run your fingers on it, you'll see that it's very, very sharp. You'll feel it kind of just wanting to slice into your finger. Now there's also a tool for this, and this is a German-made tool. Still out there, you find them. And essentially what it does is it's like the burnisher. It's got a hardened wheel here. You can just turn the wheel to another area and tighten it a little bit so you're not cutting out a groove into it. And essentially, I'm not going to do it so I don't ruin that edge, but essentially you would do it the same way, and you would just run it back and forth on that wheel, and the angle on from the circumference of the wheel will automatically put that burr pretty much where you need it to be. Now, sometimes you put that burr over too much. You bend it over too much. One way to fix that is you take there's another burnisher with a very fine point, or a screwdriver with a very fine point, and you would just run it inside of that burr, going over a little bit at a time, and this way you push it back the other way. So here we are. This one should work. Let's see if we can try it on something. There you go. It's a very short piece of wood, but you can see it takes very thin shavings. Let's see if I find a better piece. So as you can see, it takes actually shavings finer than a plane. And if you got some crazy grain on that piece of wood, it leaves it absolutely smooth, like if you use sandpaper on it. So that's pretty much it. Again, it just takes a little practice. And the important thing is the preparation of that edge. The actual bending of the edge over is the easier part. It's on the preparation that, the amount of preparation that you do, that's going to dictate how successful you are. And that's that for this one.